welcome, and it's the greatest rock album titles of all time. And when you have a discussion or a list of the greatest, you have to mention the worst first, because that's just what you do. So you think of the worst rock album titles of all time, and there's only a couple really that come to mind, and one of them is this album that Aerosmith came out with 2003, 4, 5, one of those muddled years, and it came in and it was called Honkin' on Bobo. And what, so you go, come on guys, that's it. You can't do Honkin' on Bobo. I mean, it's cheap, we get it, blah, 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 and the whole thing. I mean, they also had a greatest hits album out a while back called Really Big Ones. I thought it was fairly funny. And whenever you have a deep rock discussion with someone, they talk about the Beach Boys and how that album they had out, Pet Sounds, changed everything, the sound and the weird things they did. And okay, and I get that, but Pet Sounds, is terrible, terrible album title, and it makes you think, who came up with that? What guy in the band said, hey, let's call it Pet Sounds? How would you even think of that? How about Dog Sounds? Even that would be better. Cat Sounds. Pet Sounds? What? I mean, what record rapper producers said, hey, Pet Sounds? Terrible. And here's another thing. Come up with a name for the album. See, I mean, you can't even come up with a name for your album, because if you don't call your album something, we're forced to come up with a name for it ourselves. And we're so stupid, the only thing we can come up with is the color of the album. Like the White Album from the Beatles, and the Black Album from Metallica. You got to come up with a name for your album, unless you're Zeppelin. Then you can do whatever you want, But what they called Zepp 2 and 3, I guess. They didn't name 1 and 4. That's okay. They're allowed to do it, but no one else is. Pretenders 2, that's cool. And anyone who called it, 3 or 9th album or whatever, because at least you've given it a name. Okay, so the greatest rock album titles of all time are these. And one, you got to come up with a Yes album. And I did, because every time I think of the title of this album, came out in the 70s, I laugh. And if it makes you laugh, that means it's a great album title, right? And I think it came out right after Tormato, which goes to the bottom of the, the worst, Tales from Topographic Oceans. Because every time we get into that discussion with Yes, I laugh. Tales from Topographic Oceans. There's topography, I know that. But are there topographic oceans? Okay, maybe there are, and is there enough history that they have stories and tales from the bottom of the topographic ocean? Tales from Topographic Ocean. Okay, only Yes could come up with that. And I think it's a double album, and I think it had 4 songs on it. Was it Sound Effects from the Bottom of the Ocean, Jacques Cousteau, Deep Sea Underworld? Each one of the songs I remember 18 and a half minutes or something like that. Tales from Topographic Oceans, absolutely one of my favorites. And again, when they make you laugh, that makes it a great rock album title. Like Neil Young had this album in late 60s. Everybody knows This Is Nowhere. Which I just snicker when I hear that, because it's negative and it's down, and you assume that's where he's from or lives, so he's just talking shit about his own town. He's going, it's awful. Everybody knows This Is Nowhere. About as bad a thing as you can say about where you live or where you're from or where you currently, I don't know. Maybe it was about a particular town that he was in, and I guess he's seen them all. But it reminds me of these girls used to call me from Spring Hope when I was doing the RDU night flight, and they'd say, we're calling from Spring Hope, No Hope, they'd call it, and I would always laugh, about that. And when it comes to the greatest rock album titles of all time, Dark Side of the Moon, I mean, come on. Is there anything darker than the Dark Side of the Moon? Think about it. The moon's kind of dark already, but the Dark Side of the Moon has got to be the darkest thing there is. The Dark Side of the Moon. Pink Floyd, which is a dark band, and it's the British way, being dark and all that kind of thing. And you listen to the whole CD, and it's dark and all that. It's perfect. I love it. The Dark Side of the Moon from Pink Floyd. Another one I love goes to the top of the list, Appetite for Destruction. Consider the Source. And an album I bought maybe, early 80s or so, just because of the name, was from Isaac Hayes, and I bought it because it was called Hot Buttered Soul. And so you just think, smooth, give me that, I'll take a copy of that. And I bought it, and it was an album, analog, yes. And I put it on, and it was disappointing, but so what, I bought it just for the album title, Hot Buttered Soul. And my favorite of all time is this from Smashing Pumpkins. And whenever you talk about the greatest rock album titles of all time, when I have those discussions with people, it's the first thing pops into my head, and I mean it. You know, it's melancholy and the infinite sadness. The infinite sadness. Melancholy, two different words, you know, I don't care about that. But the infinite sadness. That, friends, is as sad as you can get. The infinite sadness. You are sad for all time. It's just heavy stuff. And Billy Corgan, they're a heavy band, good, love them, and they're down, kind of downtrodden, kind of negative and all that, so it fits them. And one of my favorite quotes of all time came from Billy Corgan. He played in Raleigh one time in 2000 something, I don't know, 8 or 9. You know, and the first thing he did, he turns on the mic with a crowd there ready to rock, and he says, it was during the Olympics year, and he comes on and he says, hey, would somebody please tell Bob Costas to shut the fuck up? I just want to watch the Olympics. Everybody around me was like, boo, you know, and I just giggled. And so that's it. The greatest rock album title of all time, without question, is Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness.